respected Madam Aruna Roy Garu and friends. Good evening and welcome to this distinguished talk. So before starting, let me say a few words about Social Democratic Forum. Social Democratic Forum is formed in 2021 when some of us are campaigning against lock of deaths of a Dalit woman, namely Mariamma, in Addagutta police station of Yadadri Bhuvanagiri district of Telangana. Few months later, one ST woman by name Lakshmi was seriously tortured by LB Nagar police in Hyderabad. So the forum took birth as an anti-caste forum. Of course, it is also anti-corporate and in the sense of opposing corporatization of education and health and other sectors. It is also non-government civil society organization. In this forum, there are doctors, retired IAS officers, professors, and serious social workers working among the most marginalized, unorganized sections in the state of Telangana. So in 2022, we have conducted a night stay program in government schools where there are little or no facilities at all. It is called Badinidra in Telugu. We have spent entire night in the government schools, almost in every district. TRS government, the then government, almost destroyed education from KG to PG, saying that it wants to give free education from KG to PG. So in 2023, during the time of elections, SDF published and released 6 documents giving practical solutions on education, health, employment creation, agriculture, caste census and corruption, and campaigned during that period. Actually, in the parliamentary elections also, we took up a bus yatra for 15 days, exposing the criminal neglect of NDA government in the field of education, health, and particularly and other problems in general. We held 78 meetings in different districts, in marketplaces, street corners, bus stands, and where cross-section of the people have attended. Similarly, during assembly elections also, we have campaigned against BRS anti-people policies, including in the field of education and health and other sectors. We held 197 meetings in different districts of Telangana. These are meetings held in street corners, marketplaces, etc. Now we are seriously campaigning for allocation of sufficient budgets in the state for health and education. For instance, we are demanding at least 15% of budget for education in the state, which the present government in Telangana promised in its manifesto, but not implementing. We are working for expansion of public education and public health in particular, and employment generation and others in general. So this is a brief about Social Democratic Forum. Now I request Professor Shanta Sinha, one of our advisory board member, to introduce today's speaker. Hello.
Shanta Sinha, I just unmuted you. Shanta Sinha. Yeah. And I'm also enabling your video. Please, you can start the video, please. Yep. Yeah.
Thank you, Aruna, for accepting this invitation. And as Professor KLN has just mentioned, the Social Democratic Forum is really playing a very significant and important role in deepening of democracy in the state of Telangana, and has taken very, I think, bold and courageous stands on several issues. I have been associated with it on its issues on education, especially on education, but Its strong pro-poor, pro-Dalit, pro-Adivasi has given it the credibility and the credence in the state of Telangana. I have the pleasure of introducing you as my mentor, as my guide, and as a person whom I have emulated for the last 4 decades. When I first saw Aruna, her visit was to the MV Foundation, and she did talk to us about MKSS and also the Right to Information movement. I was truly impressed with the work that the Mazdoor Kisan Shakthi Sanghatan has done, and in meticulously calculating the wages of every woman and the male, and in questioning the record and the data of what they actually got and what they should have got. I think it is this detail, this meticulous data that acted as a tool, very much so, which Gandhi did in his entire field work in empowering people with data, with information which could not be contested. Her exceptional work also involves in engaging with the bureaucracy and the local politicians at all levels, in building alliances with the local, as well as in confronting them for the sake of truth, and for the which is a non-negotiable for her. It requires a lot of courage for standing by truth, and that is what we learn from Aruna. Also, I think her felicity of engaging with partners at a higher level. Normally, you have civil society organizations fighting shy of meeting officials, bureaucrats, chief ministers, and Aruna showed that if you are for truth, it should not matter what the hierarchy is about. And I think this standing by truth, standing by democracy, being the voice of people, and taking charge of it and showing it to the establishment that you have to stand by them. That, in fact, I think enabled the NREGA program, which has a local quarrel has become a national policy. That is again a very speciality of what Aruna Roy stood for. The right to information also is part of a district movement, which has become a national movement. So Aruna really has the power and the a capacity to formulate pro-people policies for transparency, for empowerment of people from the practices of her fight for rights of people. Now we know we are in a difficult position. I don't want to take more time, but I must tell you, Anna, we are looking forward to your lecture on reclaiming the Constitution. We know what peril, what we are going through, and we sincerely look forward to what you have to say today. And of course, to give us the strength and courage to take our joint movement forward for reclaiming Constitution. Thank you very much for coming today.
So now may I request Aruna Roy garu to deliver the talk.
Thank you so very much, all of you.
Aruna Roy, we cannot hear. Padmaji, can you hear Aruna Roy?
No, sir.
No, we cannot.
No.
Aruna ji, you're not audible.
Audio is not showing at all. Now?
Yeah. No.
No,
Can you hear?
Yeah, now better. Now better. Yeah. We lost you. We lost you for a few minutes.
I'm sorry, I'm sitting in a village. So it can be some hiccups. I'm very sorry. It's a privilege to be invited by groups such as yours And I fully appreciate the honor of my colleagues. And of course, with Shanta, I don't know who's mentor, Shanta. I think you're my mentor. And I've looked up to you for so many things that you have done. And in fact, we have been fellows and comrades in arms, actually. We both fought for the same things together. And there's so many other people in this group whom I can't recognize because of these black boxes that I see. But I'm sure there are many of you here. And my problem with my eyesight, I can't recognize small print now. And so there are some problems, but I'm sure there are many of my friends in this group and many people who have fought together for so many issues. So in one sense, I look at this whole evening as strategy planning, because I don't have to tell you about the importance of the Constitution. I've not got to tell you about why it's important that we must fight and struggle for social democracy and economic democracy as much as for political democracy. I don't have to tell you why political corruption has become so all-pervasive today that it's entered the psyche of individuals. I don't have to tell you what has happened with the violation of the principles held dear to all of us in the preamble to the Constitution. I think I'm just going to take all that as given, that we are on the same page, that we are admirers of the preamble, the Constitution, its sanctity, its importance as a, will you close the door? Its importance as the basic document for all those people who believe in a rational, just, and equal society. And when I was young, there were some people who used to still say that the Constitution is not enough. And there was a lot of criticism about the Constitution being a conservative document. But today, that same document has become one of the most radical documents we possess to protect, to promote, so that we can ensure that every individual in this country gets justice and their rights, and their right to very basic amenities like food, shelter, clothing, and life. So I'm going to say, let us look at this meeting of equal minds and people with as much competence and as much experience as Shanta and I have. There must be many more here who have struggled very hard. And I think struggling at the grassroots level is much harder than struggling at the national level sometimes, because at the grassroots level, you're identified, you're recognized, and the vendetta against you can go into households and go into very many layers of protest, which are very difficult to handle. So today I am really talking to my peer group. I'm talking to people who have seen the same kind of hardships that I may have, and also understood that the privilege that we all have, even being able to speak English, is something phenomenal, because even if we choose to live with very poor people, even if we give up many things, we still have the mental access to a language and the structure through which we can really engage in struggle. So I'm speaking to fellows, speaking to fellow comrades, speaking to fellow activists, speaking to fellow thinkers who share and who might have even more things to say. So I'm going to try and speak as little as I can so that I can actually leave time for a discussion. I would have really appreciated this as a conversation, but let me just, in view of what Shanta has said and what you all want from me, raise a few very important issues which must now be considered by us if we have to take the struggle forward. There has been a traditional self-analysis which has left us disempowered. You know, we always look at the grand scenario and we find ourselves inadequate. But at times when things are all right with parliamentary democracy, with the constitutional values being there and principles being there, it was an indulgence, but it was all right. But today, with the kind of central government we have and the kind of imposition on the freedoms that have been imposed through structures, through the disempowerment of institutions which have been set up constitutionally and democratically to oversee power and its accountability, the way in which each institution has been undermined, in each, there's been a construct, a negative construct, in which each aspect has been singled out and been attacked. So the attack that the government in power today does, or the party in power in today does, is not so much the grand scheme as looking at individual aspects where they can attack, disenfranchise, and bring in conflict, fear, and violence. I just want to take one example, which of course I won't go into in detail, but I want to take it up as an example, is the violation of the 1991 judgment of the Supreme Court in taking up the questioning of the validity of religious structures that have been put up. Each one of these is a seminar for 10 days. I'm not going to therefore begin with in detail. The latest is that they have questioned the validity of the Dargah Sharif in Ajmer, which is Akbar we have been told that Akbar visited the Dargah Sharif, and Khwaja Mainuddin Chishti, who has been one of the most important Sufi saints, not only in India, but for all those who are Sufis and Muslims and Hindus, there is a question and there's been a case put in court, and the court has ordered that the Archaeological Survey of India should do a study to find out what there was before the Dargah was built. As soon as this order has been delivered, there's a ripple effect in Rajasthan, where we now have a BJP government, and there are many places in which questions are being raised about Muslim places of worship. The strategy of these people is to look at isolated, what we would call isolated issues, or issues which are small, apparently insignificant, but start from there and test their waters as they proceed. So the first thing they do is to prepare, attack, and then wait to see how much reaction there is, or how much of the coming together of the, within quotation marks, civil society activists, quotation marks, people, citizens, quotation marks, religious institutions, quotation marks, intellectuals gather to protest. And one of the big failures I think in the case of all of us in India has been that we have not taken the little things seriously. And I feel that it is from there that the entire strategy of their planning begins. So it would be very important for all of us to begin with the very small, and therefore I duly appreciate the fact that you started off by fighting the cases of 2 women who were attacked and killed, maybe. I'm not quite sure whether I got those facts wrong. A Dalit and a tribal woman, and from there you built your entire position and your argument, because the small is important, the small is relevant, and it's from the small that we can really build the large. And Shanta did mention that we went from the local to the national. She talked about how the MGNREG was built from a local quarrel to a national policy. Now, actually, if we look at the measures we will get public support from, we will get support only at the local level. We have to build that local level support into a support for the district level, the state level, and the national level. And that has been the strategies of all civil society activists. But now we have become disempowered because of a variety of things. I think one of the issues in which we'll have to really take very, very strong measures, but not that which seems strong to people who oppose us, but which are insidiously very important, is the whole role of education. Now, education is a very broad subject, and I'm not going to go into detail, but there are 2-3 horrors that are happening. One is the whole change of the curriculum and the removal of whole chunks of history. I don't know what the Telangana government has done, but certainly in our places, Raja Ram Mohan Roy has been removed. Mention of Gandhiji's assassination has been removed, and very many important things have been. In Maharashtra, the whole medieval India has been removed. So our children are going to grow up with a truncated idea of India's heritage, and it's a huge loss. People like us, born with the independence. I mean, I was a year old when we got independent. I mean, for me, as I say, Gandhi and Nehru and Maulana Azad, C. Rajagopalachari, or Sardar Patel, or all of them, Rajendra Prasad, I mean, Sarvapalli Radhakrishnan, were not people from a book. They were actual figures. And since I had the fortune or misfortune to live in Delhi, I actually saw them. So, and met some of them and even talked to some of them. So the question of misunderstanding history and then posturing and then adopting measures of violence and discrimination, which has become a standard format now, was impossible with our generation, because our generation had met people, had talked to people, whether they did in Delhi or in Telangana, or composite Andhra Pradesh, or in Tamil Nadu or Karnataka. We had met. My parents had met Periyar. I didn't have the fortune of meeting Periyar, but I had met many other serious leaders in Tamil Nadu also. So we knew them, and it was not just pages from a history book. So the fact that we'll have to rebuild this history is terribly important, and that should not be left only to curricular building or a training program, but it must be an informal method in which whatever we say, we intersperse history, and that history becomes relevant to people. In this building of history, there are layers, and I won't go into it. There's not only the national leaders, there's the local stories, there's the interpretation of stories, it's the idiom on which we talk to people, how we talk to people, when we take up their issues, and how we have to be sharp enough not to lose a single opportunity where our intervention will not lead to more disaster, but lead to building. And we have to look at public work and public action as divided into action and theory. We just cannot afford to lose control over either. So every time we act, we'll have to take with us the theory that is behind that action. So like you've been doing, we'll have to take, whenever there is an atrocity, it's not only the atrocity, it's the history, it's the constitution, it's discrimination, it's principles under the constitution, articles under the constitution, the ensuing laws that have been passed by the government. What is the point of that law, and what does it mean to take up a case like this? Fight the police station, fight discrimination in the village council, in the panchayat, fight discrimination in the police station. So the devil, as the British said, lies in the details. And I think they were right, because they framed the devil. They were the ones who left 50% or 80% of the devil for us to deal with when they left India. The rest of it was governance, because anyone who is in governance makes quite sure that reaching justice is impossible. So they create the biggest set of hurdles. And today, the combination of corruption and lack of accountability in governance has made the devil appear in every sphere, every aspect of life. So for this, not only is it important to break down false narratives, false stories, which are percolating, to talk every day about a social media story with local people. So the local details are critical if we really want to build a formidable structure of resistance to the common history that is being propagated. In the case of anti-people's policy, fighting, for instance, just take MGNRAGA, fighting for economic rights. If you fight for economic rights, and if you want to fight to get your wages there, there's no use now today going and protesting as we used to when we didn't get anything, to the collector, or even going now to the chief secretary. The fault lines come from New Delhi. How do you communicate this to the people in the village community, in the Narega work site? How do you take that information to them? How do you package it? How do you unpack it? How do you learn? How do you understand? And how do you translate them into votes? The biggest tragedy for all of us is that we have been unable to fix that link between access to all these various promises by government and the function of a central government elected to power or a state government elected to power. One of our biggest failures has been the inability to address identity. And in any case, all this is going to be phenomenally difficult. But I think if we don't start working now, we'll never reach the target. That ideology has been replaced by identity. And we are all fighting very hard with identity politics at all levels. I mean, it can even be not only in elections, but in a rape case. In a rape case, the rapist's caste, for instance, would dominate over the need for call for justice. So it has become extremely difficult in a society in which the caste composition or the religious composition of society dominates over the idea of a nation. and I have not got that quotation with me just now, but Baba Sahib Ambedkar had said that when the day the country allows prejudice and allows caste or identity or even the party identity to go above national interests, the nation is ruined and finished. And this understanding that the nation dies, that all we claim about nationality and the great claim about that the central government has been doing about the national flag and about all this, they're all symbols. And they distract us by using these symbols and arguing about these symbols, arresting people because somebody doesn't stand up for the national anthem, but forego all the real essential reasons for which we must have a national policy, but for which the nation must be committed, the constitutional values and secularism, the questioning of it through a CAA, the way it has been questioned again and again by its attitude to religious structures, and the whole issue of caste, in which you tend to placate the caste on the one hand and vilify it and completely demoralize it, deconstruct it on the other. So we all know that. So in this deconstruction, each community must understand how to deal with the identity issue. And I think it's going to be a huge task, a labor of commitment and love and compassion, and a commitment to values beyond that to justice, beyond that to the common fraternity that the Constitution promises us. How are we going to work through to a fraternity which will support each other during moments of such crisis? I want to touch upon another thing, and this goes back to the statement I made about Narega. And there, the lack of interest that the people in this country have in acts which ruin us in Parliament, where voices are not raised. It is all the laws that were the vicious laws that were passed in the last 5 to 10 years. Not that they weren't passed before, there were laws passed before. Protest was a little more audible in those days, but the protest that is audible has all been silenced. So the act of how the functioning of a central government and its allocation of money, for instance, on budgets. Nobody talks about budgets. It's not a common discussion, but it's of the utmost importance to the people who are on the fringes to know how much money is being allocated. So as I said in the Narega, I think there's no point going to the collector. You have to really question national allocation. And national allocation cannot be questioned by a handful of people. It will have to be questioned by Narega workers across the country. And it should be questioned at the village level, at the block level, at the district level, at the state level, and at the national level. There are issues on which we'll have to form huge conglomerates of workers, of people and committed workers. And it'll really make a difference. But the question is, how do we do it? And therefore, the act of campaign building and of holding hands becomes extremely important. And the allocation of the budget and our complete silence about it, by and large. I mean, I'm not saying about those of us who are in this meeting, but you don't hear a pip in the whole of India from people to whom it matters about issues like budget allocations. It's extremely important. In the work that we have done, we have really managed in a very small part, in a small struggle, to always glean out what is the immediate, the local, and link the local to a policy, and link the policy to governance, and make people understand as we proceed how important these things are for them getting their food in the house, and why should we fight these battles? Why do we have to sacrifice so many ways to be parts of this battle? And the fear of oppression, of imprisonment, always hanging over our heads. Why do we have to do it? Do we have a choice? These are all issues that always come up and always have to be addressed, packed and unpacked over and over again. Some people ask us, the MKSS has been in this area for so many years. Why do you still feel the need to be in this area? And I think there is a very important answer, which any of us here should be able to give, and we do give. And I keep telling them that there is a new generation every 10 years. And the new generation needs to know its constitution, needs to know its politics, needs to understand political ideology. Do you only have primary schools once and then stop your primary school and say, now we've had a primary school and children have gone to the primary school, now we don't need it? Every generation needs a primary school. Every generation needs a secondary school, a middle school. So people like us are actually huge political educators, and our presence in communities adds to the sum of political education, and constitutional education to people will only go through the collective voice of people like us who engage in struggle, unpack the struggle through advocacy, and people understand why advocacy is important. They come with us for the advocacy. They understand why it's important. And we come back from the advocacy again to engage with people, because we've never been in one confrontation or one engagement with advocacy. We come back to the people and they realize then that it's a huge thing and we have to form a campaign of some sort. Then the campaign is then argued and formed. And once the campaign is formed, again, we have advocacy, and it pushes up a little bit. So from advocacy at the subdivisional level, we go to advocacy at the district level, maybe to the state level. And after that advocacy, when we have information percolation and public meetings, it spreads even further. Then after that, there is an attempt at the campaign then forms an attempt to form a movement. The movement happens, and from the movement, again, we come back to struggle. The struggle never goes out of our lives. And I remember someone asking me, why did we need to struggle after the RTI law? The struggle was even more after the RTI law, because it was not being implemented properly. NREGA was not being implemented properly. And corruption is a constant phenomena. And the resistance to corruption is violent death. So more than 100 RTI activists have been killed because of asking the right questions. And immense number of NREGA workers have gone home hungry, have been impoverished. And now, as we see in Rajasthan, there's a new enemy, which is the datafication of society, if you like. I'm coining a new word. I mean, it's a bad word, but it conveys what I want to say, is that we've all become data and a digit. So the digitization of government records of people, everything, which was supposed to be the answer from heaven to eradicate poverty and access, has become our biggest enemy. In Rajasthan, we've discovered that more than 1 lakh pensioners have just been removed. Do we call this civil death, as Justice Muralidhar called it, or do we call death by digitization or erasure of a life? So you're still alive and you're erased. The bank account is closed, your books are closed, and there are elderly people with absolutely no support. There are people with physical disabilities completely removed from it. And somebody says, oh, it's only 1 lakh out of so many. It's not a question of percentage. It's a question of every single individual mattering, and of the most vulnerable mattering. Now, these issues again have to be raised. Again, you have to produce voices. Again, you have to produce evidence. Again, you have to get an argument. Again, you got to go to the Supreme Court. There is no end to these troubles. So our community of people believe that struggle is a constant, and that constant has to be guided by the Constitution. It has to be guided by people's involvement. And without, there is no question of getting justice. So this education about social action, I feel, is sadly lacking amongst younger people today. We find that young people don't understand in large enough numbers about the need for constant, continual, issue-based, constitution-based, legally supported public action. And everyone now has got sucked into the market economy, and the main thing is money, packages, how much, what will be my packet, etc. But we have to break into it. And somehow, when I recall how many of us were there who broke away from society to start public action, we were a very, very small percentage. I think 0.01% of our generation walked out from jobs and universities and so on to get into public action. And I'm sure in this country, even if 5% of our young get out and get into public action, it will be a large number of people. So how do we then now promote large mass public action has got to be a challenge for all of us. And it's only through that mass public action that we can draw the attention of people back to the Constitution and to the whole aspect of how equality, liberty, and justice need voice. And that voice is to be strengthened through public action, because that public action includes people from ex-members of the bench, current members of the bar. It includes professors, it includes all kinds of people who may not spend their lives doing that, but who are willing to give support to a single act or an issue. And I think engaging, as Shanta said, we have to engage with the government, which is something which we have learned the hard way, because ultimately we can't substitute the government. There is no money source or political construct or even a people's organization that can replace the government. The government has to perform, has to deliver, and will have to be forced willy-nilly to take cognizance of the Constitution and address the issue of resources. We cannot form a welfare state. At the most, we can enforce a part of the welfare state, make sure that it delivers. But to get the welfare state going is going to be one of the biggest challenges of modern India. It's going to be one of the best resources for struggle. It's also going to be one of the most important areas in which we can enter the struggle in a fairly easy manner, because people understand the access to a welfare system, access to resources, access to health, access to work, access to schooling. They understand that. So it's through that growing understanding now of welfare benefits that we will have our next major battles. And alliances are critically important. And I think we all know how important these alliances are. And in these alliances, we'll have to set aside petty rivalries, petty differences, struggles for leadership, which are all inherent amongst us as much as they are amongst politicians, and understand that if we don't stand together, we are finished. And I think there have been many alliances which has come to be, and like all alliances, some get fatigued and disappear for a while, but they're not dead. I think we have to revive everything. And if I can just look at the number of alliances like this I'm part of, I know that people are working. I think we also have to recognize that we are all working, because these things are so specific and so linked to an individual issue that unless we look at the details, we are finished. So the looking at the details requires specific specialization, concentration, forming small nucleus groups, but we all have to hold hands, and there is no way away from it. And ultimately, we all have to learn to speak truth to power, and we speak it in different ways. It's not necessary to speak it in a manner in which we attract immediate violence against us or immediate suppression of ourselves, but we have to build up a vocal voice, a local voice, which can then fight for us, with us, for constitutional values. I do think that almost all of us in this group know that it's very difficult. Now, my question to you and me and myself and my people, though the MKSS keeps fighting and keeps understanding, 2-3 things which we don't forget. We forget that looking at the larger problems and the challenges, we don't recognize the person next door is a huge tragedy. We have understood that to understand the challenge of that person next door, or the heroism of a small individual or a person next door, gives us this immense amount of strength to carry on the bigger struggles. So that is one thing MKSS has learned. And whether it is just 20 people walking to villages to talk about the Constitution, 20 young people walking to the village to talk about the Constitution, to sing songs and to do theatre, or whether it is engaging on a large scale with pensions not being given in a state, or whether it is questioning innumerable things. Now, the next item on this agenda will be questioning the takeover of religious institutions on the pretext that many years ago there was another religious building underneath it. We'll have to get all of us together. We'll all have to collectively protest. So in a sense, for me at 78, life should be over, but life doesn't get over. And there are things that seem to need attention all the time. So we need to do it through the written word, through the spoken word, through theater, through song, and in multiple ways in which our young people are so good today, and the ways in which they take it up through many different kinds of ways, and also fight through the internet, through media, which we find a little difficult at this time and age in our lives, but which has taken over the imagination and control our people's politics and the youth especially. We have to still break down that vicious citadel and place something that carry on the dreams of the Indian Constitution. But by and large, I think the most vital thing and of immediate need is through all these local battles, these small battles, and through these all small protests that we protect, say, the preamble to the Indian Constitution, which is for me the most important text to which I owe my life and owe my life's work, and owe my optimism about the future. And how are we going to communicate the importance of this organization, of the Constitution, to very many organizations, and the work of these organizations, and finally to people, remains our challenge. But I'm also very optimistic, because I've never found so many groups working on the Constitution as I found now. And the awareness about the Constitution is phenomenally much higher than it was during my lifetime when I was a student. And I think that the awareness of these rights is now clear. The question really lies as to how and when and if we all get together to unite to fight it. And I think there must be maybe a campaign. Maybe Shanta will also think about it, and all of you think about it. There are all kinds of little nucleus struggling for the Constitution. So to bring them all under one umbrella, so that we feel the power of the people who fight for keeping the Indian Constitution and its values going, beginning with secularism, the fraternity, equality, and liberty that is so deeply enshrined in them, the right to religious freedom that is so important in the Constitution, which was defined by us, and to understand that we did not opt for a theocracy for very, very clear reasons. And as Sarvapalli Radhakrishnan said in one of the discussions on the Constitution, that if we allow any kind of traditional viewpoint, caste, and other religious viewpoints to take over India, we are finished. So in a sense, we will be not truncated, but will be bifurcated and trifurcated and whatever else the terminology may mean, till we become isolated small groups. So the Indian Constitution remains still today the most important document for me and for all of us in this meeting, but also for so many young people of now recognizing how important and vital this Constitution is for all of us. So may I end, if you don't mind, by just taking the pledge, and I think this doesn't allow us to say it collectively, but I think the pledge again reminds me of what the Constitution has always meant. Now in the School for Democracy, which is another institution, the MKSS, sister institution of the MKSS, wherever we go, whatever meeting we begin with a pledge to the Indian Constitution. We had a huge gathering a month and a half ago in a place called Biawar, where the Right to Information campaign began. And we did a very unusual thing. We looked at the rising belief in religious faith, and we invited 4 secular religious leaders to come and bless the Indian Constitution at the beginning of the meeting. So they came, and they represented Hinduism, Islam, Christianity, and they represented Sikhism. And they came and they said that it's because of the Indian Constitution that they can exist, that no religion speaks about intolerance. And these grand statements were made, and it was critically important for us that religious leaders should make that statement. And we all collectively took the pledge to the Constitution. So maybe I'm not a religious person, but most of the people I work with, 90% of the people I work with, the poor, the marginalized, are people who have religious faith. So we thought that we must reinterpret religious faith to mean that religious faith does not mean division, anger, hatred, and killing. Actually, religious faith means tolerance, understanding each other's religions, and actually collectively taking a pledge to the Indian Constitution. So let me just go over it once. And it's like a chant for me, and an extremely important chant. We, the people of India, having solemnly resolved to constitute India into a sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic, to secure to all its citizens justice, social, economic, and political, liberty of thought, expression, belief, faith, and worship, equality of status and of opportunity, and to promote, I'm going to distort it a bit and say, amongst us all, fraternity, assuring the dignity of the individual and the unity and integrity of the nation. And if we do spend our lives doing and successfully doing one part of the Indian Constitution, we really promote the dreams of our forefathers, and we continue to provide space for our young people to speak truth to power. I'm going to end here, and I'm going to ask you to please carry on with the conversation so that I hear what you all have to say and we can take it further. Shanta?
So thank you very much, madam, for the inspiring kind of lecture, especially about the struggles we are little aware of, especially different steps in the struggle conducted, and struggle is constant, and we require a large mass public action is the need of the hour. Without much delay, I request Professor Padmaja Shah, madam, our co-convener, to say a few words, and hand over to Rai Das Mantina to conduct the question answer sessions.
Ellen Garu, I think we should move on to question answer session because we are short of time, and we can move on to question answer session right away.
Yeah.
Okay. Over to Rai Das Mantina.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Aruna Roy garu. And I am actually sitting in Boston area, listening to you speak. And there are many people joined from US, UK, and other parts of Europe. And we wanted this meeting to be kind of reachable across, because the topic is a very important topic. We don't want to confine to Telugu people, but there was demand to be in English, and also there is equally demand now to translate into Telugu, which is really sorry. Those ask for a Telugu translation, please. What we'll do is we'll work closely with Padmaja Shah garu, Kailan garu, to do some thumbnail translation in the YouTube. We are recording this session, and the beauty of this technology is, this speech will be a living speech for years to come. We are going to మేము దాన్ని తెలుగులో కొంత thumbnail పెట్టడానికి ట్రై చేస్తాము. దయచేసి I'm not going to translate here, but what I'm going to do is తెలుగులో ఒక 2 విషయాలు చెప్తాను. And Aruna Roy said the biggest failure we have seen is the identity. Basically గా ఒక కులాన్ని బట్టి, ఒక మతాన్ని బట్టి, ఒక రీజన్ బట్టి న్యాయము చేయడం జరుగుతుంది. అంటే ఈవెన్ పర్పెట్రేటర్స్, తప్పు చేసినోడికే న్యాయం జరుగుతుంది, ఎందుకంటే వాడి కులము, వాడి ధనికుడు కావచ్చు, అట్లా. అదొకటి నేను హైలైట్ చేయాలనుకున్నా. రెండవది కరప్షన్ అనేది ఒకటి. అవినీతి, అన్ని విధాల అవినీతి వల్ల కూడా గవర్నమెంట్ ప్రోగ్రామ్స్ కానీ, గవర్నమెంట్ న్యాయం కానీ జరగలేకపోతుందని. ఒకటి తను ఏం చెప్పిందంటే, ఒక 5% యూత్ పబ్లిక్ యాక్షన్లోకి దిగితే ఈ రాజ్యాంగాన్ని కాపాడడానికి, రాజ్యాంగం ఇచ్చిన ఏదైతే హక్కులు ఉన్నాయో వాటిని కాపాడుకోవడానికి ఒక 5% యూత్ రంగంలోకి దిగితే ఎలా ఉంటుంది అని. అదేవిధంగా ఈ పబ్లిక్ యాక్షన్లో అన్ని రంగాలకు సంబంధించిన మనుషులు ఉండాలి, న్యాయవాదులు ఉండాలి, సోషల్ యాక్టివిస్టులు ఉండాలి, అకాడమిక్ సంబంధించిన వాళ్ళందరూ ఉండాలని తను రిక్వెస్ట్ చేసింది. అండ్ ఇంకోటి అలయన్సెస్ గురించి తను ఏం చెప్పిందంటే, కాన్స్టిట్యూషన్ గురించి ఇప్పుడున్నంత అవేర్నెస్ చరిత్రలో ఎప్పుడు లేదు. సో ఆ అవేర్నెస్ను ఇంకా మాసెస్కు, ఈ కాన్స్టిట్యూషన్ ఇచ్చిన రైట్స్ కానీ, ప్రివిలేజెస్ కానీ మాసెస్ వరకు తీసుకెళ్ళాలి అని చెప్పి తను కూడా రిక్వెస్టింగ్. ఒకటి తను, ఇట్స్ ద బ్యూటీ, ఇంత ఇంపార్టెంట్ సెషన్లో కూడా మనకు ఒక విషయం చెప్పింది. ఎన్నో గ్రూప్స్ ఉంటాయి, ఎన్నో ప్రజాస్వామిక వాయిసెస్, గొంతులు ఉంటాయి కదా. మీరంతా కలిసికట్టుగా పనిచేయండి. మీలో ఉన్న చిన్న చిన్న డిఫరెన్సెస్ ఏమన్నా ఉంటే వాటిని పక్కన పెట్టి ఏదైతే రాజ్యాంగాన్ని కాపాడుకోవడానికి, రాజ్యాంగం ఇచ్చిన హక్కులు కాపాడుకోవడానికి అందరు కలిసి పనిచేయండి. ఒకటి క్లోజింగ్లో లోకల్ వాయిసెస్ను ఏదైతే ఇప్పుడు ఇక్కడ తెలుగు స్టేట్లో కావచ్చు, బీహార్లో కావచ్చు, జార్ఖండ్లో కావచ్చు, ఎక్కడెక్కడైతే యాక్టివిస్టులు ఉంటారో వాళ్ళ వాయిసెస్ను స్ట్రెంథెన్ చేయండి. ఈ కాన్స్టిట్యూషన్ మనకిచ్చిన ప్రివిలేజెస్ని ప్రొటెక్ట్ చేసుకోవడానికి. సో దేర్ ఆర్ సో మచ్ టు టాక్ అబౌట్. ఆమె చాలా ఉంది, కానీ మేము యూట్యూబ్లో కొంత తెలుగులో దానికి అనువాదం చేయడానికి ట్రై చేస్తాము. అండ్ without further ado, we will go into this question and answers. In fact, Aruna Roy said the question and answers allow you all to engage with her. Okay, so Okati, you can raise your hand to ask a question. I will unmute, or you can post a question in the chat. There are two ways. You can raise your hands, I will unmute, allow you to ask a question, or you can post a question in the chat. We'll get started with the question and answer section. Anybody, please raise your hands. Okay. All right. Srinivas. I'm going to take a question from Venkatreddy Garu. Venkatreddy Garu, he works with MVF Foundation. Venkatreddy Garu, please go ahead. Sorry, I put you on the spot, but you work very closely with marginalized section, and education is very close to your heart. You're a big supporter of Constitution and its rights and privileges. Venkatreddy Garu, please go ahead. Venkatreddy Garu, I have unmuted you.
Can you unmute?
I did. Yeah. I did, sir. I did,
yeah,
sir.
Actually, the very striking lesson I can see the alliances and work together. That is where the major problem for activists like us. How do we do it is a big challenge. The right wing, everybody is uniting themselves, but we are dividing ourselves. That is where the crux in our whole thing, I can see that weakness of our entire campaign. Can you throw some light, any non-negotiable principles or what to do that? How do we come together is a big challenge for us in the grassroots level.
Yeah. Aruna Roy Garu, you listen to it. It's English. Please go ahead.
Actually, I'll be very brief. I completely agree with you, Venkatreddy Garu, that we don't get together, but let's just see what are the non-negotiables that will bring people together. First thing, I think the Constitution is a non-negotiable now for all of us. Whether you're fighting against religious discrimination, caste discrimination, gender discrimination, you're fighting against any kind of economic discrimination. For us, the Constitution is critically important for survival. So I really think that we haven't really built a formulation about the Constitution, which will become like a statement of purpose, also a pledge to do it, and also become like a series of actions that we will perform regardless. And if anything or any institution of government or any kind of policy or law encroach in the least bit on the Constitution, we will all raise a collective voice. Because the thing is that the collective voice is not raised strong enough, especially about, like, say, the educational curriculum. So much tampering has been done. A whole generation of new Indians are going to grow up with completely screwed up ideas about Indian history and about Indian nationalism, about everything Indian. They're going to question whether communities who have lived in this country for thousands of years are Indians because of the curriculum. But we have not all together, all the agencies together, everything put together, made a strong statement against the tampering with the curriculum that has been done systematically over the last so many years. We filed a writ in which I was a signatory, but court threw our thing out very easily. But it's the numbers, we have to be numbers of people. People in Telangana must understand what happens in the rest of India. People in the rest of India must understand what's happening in Telangana. And we must identify together with a history in which different communities live together for years and years. Even the definition of an Indian, who is an Indian? How do you define who's an Indian? And if they could start this argument by saying that before this there was something else on the ground, before that there was something else, who is the original Indian? The only original Indians are the Adivasis. The rest of us all are immigrants. So who's going to state these things and say that this kind of minimalizing the identity of an Indian is going to ruin the country, the fraternity, the idea of equality, the idea of comradeship, the idea of being different, the idea of importance of stating dissent, of everything. It ruins every single thing. So how do we again begin to speak? And what are these non-negotiables? I think we should really sit down and circulate a set of non-negotiables, simple ones. I mean, we shouldn't go into reams of pages because that never meets the purpose. There have been time and time again, this Bharat Jan Andolan, BJA set up something, many people joined it. Then there's something else set up by somebody, we all join it. We join everywhere and we find ourselves in many communities of beings, but we're the same people. We have to really increase the kind of people who come into it, and they must see the need to get together for their own individual lives. Every campaign that I'm sure you've all fought in this big group of people as well as I, is when you see the individual need coalesce with the community need and the public need. If these three things don't coincide, we don't struggle long enough to achieve anything.
Okay, thank you so much, Aruna Garu. And next question from Dr. Venkat Marasu, and he happens to be also from Boston area. He's a MIT scholar. Dr. Venkat Marasu, please go ahead. I'm going to unmute you, Dr. Venkat. Unmute, yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you, Roy. And
you can start the video also. I have enabled you. You can start the video. Yeah.
I'm not in it.
Yeah, please go ahead. Yes,
Actually,
we can see.
I think I'll comfortable like this. I'm not in it. So, Aruna Roy Garu, thank you for taking time, and it was a very wonderful way to put the current context of Indian situation and the importance of the Constitution. And thanks to SDF for organizing this very important lecture at this time. And Aruna Roy Garu, with all your decades of service working at the grassroots levels and launching so many agitations, we all salute you for. I know you're 78 years old, but the way you spoke and the way you are appearing, you're still very, very active. My question is more a little bit of a philosophical. I might take a little time. Pardon me, everyone. See, I grew up in the hinterlands of Telangana in an extreme Maoist activity taking place. 70s and early 80s. You can imagine if those who lived there, this was an extreme form of Maoist activity was going on, and then declined. So we used to just sing, when we have a leisure class in my 11th and 12th, we used to go to a room and sing Lal Salam songs. That's how vibrant that movement was. But for various reasons, of course, it went down, and somebody says there was a, very repression, the movements, the state always try to repress. Don't say that, right? But for various reasons, that went down. And of course, we have seen the decline of communism in many states, at least last state that was guarding, West Bengal, Tripura, and recently, Kerala also. And then we lost some of the, socialist parties emerged in the North India. Congress lost its ground. So what I've seen is definitely the saffronization and Hindutva has grown. So as a person who grew up from a very, very humble background, and I was fortunate to have utilized all the government education and the constitutional guarantees. I could study in some of the best institutes and then come to United States, and I've been an activist for Telangana, maintain a grassroots level, very connections. I'm also part of SDF. With this background, what I reflecting on, what is going on, and I know people like you have spent your lifetime as a little bit outsider, as a little bit critic. Indian, for we accept or not, India has moved. We made progress. We are in this world of packages, this and that. So there is a middle class that has been created, which is very far away from their roots and the most marginalized. The communities that I grew up, where I firsthand I can relate. We were all humble, but they cannot relate to the most marginalized. They cannot think about the society, and this is the environment I grew up, and they're disconnected. So the way of organizing these progressive forces and socialist communist ideology, or rationalist, you can think all these guys, should we, a lot of time we romanticize with the villages, romanticize with the poverty. I mean, is there a better way to organize our movement such a way that, we have a constitution now. We have, whether we like it or not, the rulers try to disempower these, how much ever he tried. I think he was shown his place. Modi was shown his place in these elections. So the Indian democracy and constitution and society is very resilient. I don't think it will be easily usurped. It is a temporary thing. So my question is, do we have to organize in a way, for example, the Telangana movement? In my view, that is one of the greatest people struggle in the modern India that was successful within a parliamentary democracy, within the framework of constitution. We resolved a major issue. That is the power of our democracy. That is the resilience of Indian constitution. So my question to you is, should we move to a different way of organizing? Political power is important, economic power is important. The institutions are there. The fights have to be conducted at the institution rather than getting onto the streets and raising. Is there a tipping point that India has to reinvent, especially
Yeah,
the people who are well wishers? So I will stop
Aruna
here.
respond.
That is my
Yeah, let Aruna
question. Yeah,
respond. Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. Aruna garu, please unmute and respond.
You asked a very important question, but that really requires another lecture, but I'm not going to go into detail. But I certainly think that 2 or 3 modern issues which are critically important for us. And they also speak about equality, they talk about liberty, they talk about freedom. And India has negatively moved from a discussion on values and on principles to values and principles promoted by affluence, consumer society, and every relationship has become transactional. Now, even relationships between human beings has become transactional, and we have changed the system by which we evaluate the effectiveness, the goodness, or the value of anything. So today, you do not question the opulence of a wedding. You do not question the amount of money that is spent. You do not question the vulgarity of it all. And one time, 30 years ago, we were fighting against opulent spending. 40 years ago, fighting against these huge ostentatious marriages. We were fighting against vulgar display of money. We were discussing all this in a comparatively easy environment. Today, your fashion designers, your movie, the impact of various movie moguls on the thought of individuals, the market itself, the availability of things, Amazon. I mean, I can go on, and there's a huge list. So what has really happened is that we have a big nexus between the market, which has now become the demigod, and which has actually become not only the demigod of money, but of politics. Today, most of our governments, including yours in the US, is wed to big money. So big money couldn't care a tuppence, couldn't care a damn about whether you have any value which is related to ethics or public ethics or morality. Its value is only on how much profit one can make. So we have an invisible enemy, and that invisible enemy has to be fought. And for fighting that invisible enemy, you have to really look at the rural economy in a completely different light. Let me tell you that the rural economy today in India, where I live, is a debt economy, DEBT, debt economy. Everyone is in debt, but everyone looks and appears more affluent. Many people have motorcycles. Many people have refrigerators in their homes. It's all on EMI. And if you look at the amount of money they earn and the amount of money needed for repayment, they are in their essential consumption of nutrition or a value exactly where they were, almost just a little better. If you look at the educational system, the system of education, however decrepit it may have looked in terms of visuals, the education system was much better. You passed your higher secondary and you knew far more than a postgraduate today knows, because everything has become just paper. And you have, instead of educational institutions, you have these places where you're coached. So the coaching center has taken over from the university. There are multiple devils now. There are multiple facets one has to fight. And you are quite right. The tools have to be different and the enemy has to be redefined. And for that, we need patience, we need thoroughness, and we need a new ideological position to take place where we are not fighting for people not to do something, but to do something with better ethics and with a greater deal of sharing. And the idea of sharing is inimical to this new economic design, because it's not sharing that's important, it's the profit that's important. And you live in the US, so you know that better than I do. So we have to create a new discourse. And we are here today to actually see how that new discourse can be created.
Yeah, thank you so much, Aruna. Before we go to the question, to all the audience, some of you joined a little later, and the topic of discussion. This seminar is conducted by the Social Democratic Forum. This organization, the mission and vision is to protect and defend the Constitution. Its objectives mainly focused on promoting education, healthcare, and women empowerment, social justice, and youth empowerment. And the SSTF in last 3 years has worked on so many important initiatives. And it is the STF is, I look at STF being in America as a bridge between the governments, the rulers, and the population. And STF does conduct a series of sessions, and primary focus is on Constitution. Thank you, Aruna Roy, for joining. Next questions, I'm going to read out 2 questions. Please respond. And the one question is, how effectively, how citizens effectively engage in this debate to protect and defend the Constitution, reclaim the Constitution. And just the second question is the rumored, and I want to be very objective here, okay? The rumored EVM tampering is stealing the franchise. Constitution offered, out of all the offerings, the Constitution offered the vote, one of the weapon for the citizens to protect and defend democracy. So the rumored EVM tampering is robbing the votes, and the Election Commission has become a mute spectator. So 2 questions, please. One, how citizens effectively engage to protect, defend Constitution. Second is, the EVM tampering. Thank you, Aruna. Please go ahead, Aruna Roy.
People engage, they're already engaging in many ways, in many different ways. And they will only engage in the intersection between their lives and the system that is denying them the right to live. You have minorities engaging. You have women engaging already in so many issues of violence against their bodies. You have Dalits engaging where there's violence on them. You have people who are unemployed, and unemployment figures are stunning today. And the unemployment don't have a voice today in this country. They are given palliatives, and they're buying those palliatives because your media is corrupt, and your media is selling those palliatives as if it's a new thing and a new India is being defined. And actually, if you look at the real nutritional levels or the new access to resources or the new understanding levels of understanding, it's abysmal. The new idea of a good country or a better world is the US. And I'm afraid I don't think the US is anybody's answer to any dream, because politically it has shown us what not to do very much more often than what has to be done. So I think you have to recognize that there are protests that exist and give them space, give them credibility, give them value, and give them recognition. If we do that, then we bring in the basic structure for future battles. But for this, you will have to be willing to stick your neck out, to argue for public spaces to protest. All public spaces have been disenfranchised in this country. You cannot go to a public street, a public space, and sit down and protest, which is used to be our mode. If the right to information came to be, we had hundreds and thousands of protests. For 11 years, every year, on an average between 200 to 250 days, we were on protest. And we used to say, the street is our parliament, the street is our policy room, the street is our theater, the street is our platform for communication in many multiple different ways. The songs we created, or the arguments we created, everything was percolated through to large numbers of people because we had access to passers-by and citizens of India who were not necessarily inhabiting air-conditioned rooms. Now you've taken away that. You have taken away the right to dissent, the right to disagree. The moment you have dissent, you're imprisoned, you're told you're an urban Nakshal, you're a this, that, or the other. You are taken away to jail, you're told that you're an anti-national, you're anti the government. In many ways, you're not anti the government, you're anti the violation of a principle of the Constitution, which is the right to freedom of expression, free expression, and conduct. So in a sense, what you'll have to strengthen is the constitutional value of protest, that every protest is constitutionally validated. If you do that, I think you will see a map of India, which is very different. I really think one suggestion I'm going to give you, because many of you are sitting in the US and other countries, that why don't you do a mapping of protests in the country, and you will see how wide the dispensation of protest is, how many different issues are taken up, and how many of them actually relate to constitutional precepts and values. And you will know that this is already an ongoing process. The thing is to strengthen it, to give it visibility, to talk about those issues in places where there is power. Because power has understood that articulation and amplification are its worst enemy, and people who say this despite and without fear are social activists, are activists. They are muzzling the activists by putting them in jail. They are muzzling activism by calling them terrorists, by calling them an N number of things. So just start a discussion where you disabuse this whole nomenclature that has crept into the language, refashion not only the discourse, but refashion the idiom. And we do begin with a very, very new impetus to how young people will understand what's happening. Because they are being fed with the information that all these people don't want India to develop, which is so totally wrong. So second thing about the EVM, you know that two things I want to answer. None of the countries in Europe, not many of the countries in Europe, I do know about them all, do not want any electronic voting. You know that it doesn't happen in Great Britain, it doesn't happen in the Netherlands, it doesn't happen in many of those countries. They've rejected, they want the paper ballot. And for very good reasons, because tracing a paper ballot is much easier. At one time, I was in the Indian Administrative Service, and I was a returning officer for elections way, way back in my youth. And I know that we were petrified of one, because you can do recounting, you can re-examine the votes, and it can be, if one vote is not counted in the correct manner, the returning officer was held to blame, and all hell broke loose for the returning officer. So we used to be on tenterhooks till the counting was done. And we didn't eat or go anywhere And for hours together, we were locked up in a room with only a toilet, nothing else. Occasionally, some food may or may not have arrived. The EVM is liable to be tampered with. It's liable to be tampered with technically and by human intervention. Both these things exist. And in a country where technology is new and use of technology is difficult for many people who are born before, say, 2000, so, or to say 1990, the use of technology for voting itself is a frightening aspect. So the button, to press the button, how long the light comes on, how long we can see it. So we need a paper trail. And unfortunately, the Supreme Court has ruled against us when we wanted every EVM machine to also have the paper trail. And that was critically important to make sure that the EVM machine was actually doing it correctly or not. Because very often, and I don't know, I haven't verified it, but there is a whole campaign on it. And I can give you reference to Mr. Devasahayam, who runs a campaign now against the EVM. You can check with him and write to him about these various aspects. But there is a great deal of suspicion of the veracity of the EVM machine. But more frightening than that, in one sense, is the co-option of the Election Commission by the government. The Election Commission, like all other commissions, were created to be independent of the government, to oversee the functioning of the government, so that none of these things ever came to be. Now, the Election Commission has already been compromised, has already been made a part of government, and the Election Commissioner, the Chief Election Commissioner, voices and echoes the Prime Minister. How can you have a democracy at this rate? So the election then becomes a farce. So that's why I think while we will still continue to vote because it is important, we have to fight for a just system and for a transparent system in which you can check whether your vote has actually gone to the person you voted for or not.
Thank you, Aruna Roy. In top 25 countries, 2 countries have a electronic based, and 2 other countries has a mixed, and but over 90%, developed countries are paper ballots. And yeah, thank you. And next question is from the Y.S. Thomas Reddy. I'm going to unmute you, Thomas Reddy, and speak. Your video is also on. Thomas Reddy, please go ahead and ask the question.
Good evening, sir. Thank you very much. And it's I must admit, it's a privilege and honor to see and hear Madam Aruna Roy, though virtually. She has been our icon of social activism since a long time. Coming to the point of reclaiming the Indian constitution back into the Indian household and the very heart of an Indian, ordinary Indian, I'd like to submit 2 points for a kind consideration. At the outset, I see Mr. Roy has introduced this meeting as anti-caste. I would per se say that caste is not got per se, doesn't have any bad connotations as such. It's only just the meaning that are attached to it, the practices that are attached to it that are undesirable. So I would suggest that not to use the word anti-caste. The second thing I would like to suggest to the organizers is to have a common WhatsApp group or a contact number which we can contact, which we can relate to, we can contact to, get in touch with. Why I'm saying this is that many activists, in fact, over the time before, since long time, many are used to the word social activist. But of late, what's the most important thing that we read right now is rights activists. Because if we need to reclaim the constitution back into our hearts, into our households, into the very presence of the Indian citizen, it's very important that we need to uphold the constitution in its truest sense. That can only be done by 2 ways, by creating awareness and disseminating the success stories. So for disseminating the success stories, one person get to know that something has happened, a person downtrodden, someone in the back, getting along in the backwardness, being subject to untouchability, discrimination, and suddenly gets to know that one of his peers or one of his friends or one of his colleagues, so fellow citizens, has come up by way of using the constitution to reclaim his rights back, then it's a success story. So we need to weave the success stories into a quotient, into the larger fabric of India, there's the democracy. So I would suggest that I request the organizers to give us an opportunity to view into the fabric, the different success stories, those small and big, into the larger context, larger fabric.
Thomas Garu, we have 3 minutes left. Please, what is the question? It is just a comment.
No, my question is like, I would suggest you not to use anti-caste. The second thing that I would like to use is give us a platform where we can weave our success stories so that other people can imitate, so other people can learn, other people can practice.
Okay, sure. I in the WhatsApp, in the chat, I shared phone number. Do you want Aruna Garu to respond, or is just a comment?
I'll just make one comment. I didn't say anti-caste, actually. I said identity. You know, victimization of Muslims, victimization of Christians, victimization of many communities of all castes is because I said identity politics. I did not mean caste. I meant identity politics, and identity is beyond caste. It can be identified as any kind of category, and that is very harmful, because I know that today, for a Muslim child studying in any place, to get a room on rent has become difficult. The first thing they ask you is not what you study or where you're from or what you are, but your name. And the name then fixes an identity on you on the basis of which you're discriminated. So that's why I said identity.
Yeah, Aruna Roy, actually, he was referring to SDF introduction, okay? There was, So thank you so much. Satyam, I'm going to unmute you. Ask the question, please. Ask the question by starting with what, how, and when and why, okay? Don't go into too much introduction because we don't have much time left. Go straight to the question. Go straight to the question.
Sure. Hello, Aruna. It was lovely hearing you. My question is simple. I mean, how do you take the Constitution, its values, its principles to people who are essentially sort of either politically neutral, apolitical, or even more, who are sort of right-wing leaning? Because in my little understanding, the Constitution is for everybody, even those who don't believe in it. But these days, it's becoming increasingly difficult to sort of even talk about the Constitution to people who sort of identify you as liberal or left or whatever. So how have your experiences been in taking the Constitution to people who may not be constitutionally inclined from the right beginning? Yeah.
Well, one very interesting way in which it becomes relevant to everybody, that we have all at some point or the other been victims of inequality and victims of lack of access to justice. And if we interpret the Constitution in a manner in which each individual understands that what they take so much for granted actually emanates from the Constitution. Take very simple things. The right to information law is being used by everybody, regardless of community, regardless of identity, regardless of region, religion, language, everything. But if the Constitution goes, the right to information law goes, because it emanates from Article 19 of the Indian Constitution. So that goes. So if you are a MNREGA worker, it doesn't matter what community or caste you belong to. If it goes, if the Constitution goes, all the rights-based laws go. If the rights-based laws go, then innumerable number of people are going to be impacted and affected by it. The RTI is across class. So it's not only going to impact the very poor, it's going to impact very huge numbers of very influential people, including lawyers who use the RTI. Today, there are between 60 to 80 lakh, that is 6 to 8 million users of the RTI every year, and on innumerable number of subjects. I mean, for instance, even the electoral bonds case, to get information from the Supreme Court, you had to use the RTI. So you have to use a series of arguments to say that unless all these rights you take so much for granted, they wouldn't exist if you did not have the right to information, the right to so-and-so. All these are guarantees, even your right to vote. The whole act of electing anybody to power is vested in the Indian Constitution. So we have to reinterpret it not merely as a left voice or the right voice or a centrist voice, but as the right to a moral, ethical, constitutional, value-based society in which we are which is as relevant to me as to somebody else, that it should be just, and we should really get that our issues should be addressed. If we want them addressed, Without the constitution, we live on the whimsicalities of anyone who's elected to power and becomes the Prime Minister of India. And that person, right wing, left wing, centrist, anything, can act absolutely bizarrely out of sync with all morality. It's the constitution that binds the system to some kind of moral code, ethical code, and it's relevant.
Thank you so much, Aruna Roy garu, and all the participants. We thank you. And lack of time, we're going straight into the next step. The word of thanks by, Professor and the Dr. Rama of NIT Warangal. She's my colleague in the SDF core team. Rama garu, please, you can go ahead with the word of thanks. Yeah.
Dear all, good evening to all of you. On behalf of SDF, I am honored to propose vote of thanks for Aruna Roy's inspiring speech on reclaiming the Constitution and Indians' Constitution and the citizens' vision. Thank you, Professor K. Lakshminarayana sir, for arranging this wonderful session today. We are very grateful to Madam's thought-provoking presentation. Your commitment for creating awareness, trying to bring positive change in the society is truly admirable, ma'am. So we don't have words to express our thanks, actually. So we are very much thankful for your patience in answering all the questions in the session also. Ma'am, we are promising you here from this forum, we will strive to protect the Indian Constitution and its spirit. And I am very much thankful to Ma'am Shanta Sinha to introduce her guide to this program. Really, thank you very much, Ma'am, Professor Shanta Sinha. And I am thankful to Rai Mantana for actively engaging the question and answer session and arranging this entire program. Thank you, Roy. Thank you one and all for patient listening to the program. And I wish this SDF forum should continue the same spirit, with the same spirit, democratic spirit. We organize such events, and I request all the audience in future also, your participation is important. We need, so at this age, 8 years old woman is inspiring us. So we have to carry forward that mission to the rural, when ma'am now also when she is speaking with us, she is in village. So that means we have to carry such great person's vision. So thank you very much. Thank you one and all for patient listening.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you, Aruna Roy garu. I think this topic is a gigantic topic. In the coming days, with our SDF will reach out to you for more sessions on a focused topics of Constitution. Thank you so much. Audience, if you really want to engage with SDF, please reach out to the chat. There's a number, you can message me in WhatsApp. In any way, form you want to engage with us. And on this occasion, I would like to thank you, our founding chairman, actually, convener, Aruna Murali garu. And now he's serving the government on the education, which is close to his heart. And thanks to him for his vision for starting this Social Democratic Forum. And thanks to all the SDF members who worked directly, indirectly to make this session success. And it is my privilege, honor to be in the same call with you, Aruna Roy garu. And that is a dream come true. Thank you so much.